And then I'm going to share my screen so that I can show you and talk about the wonders of palm trees and the entire palm family group. So yes, if you're talking about the tropics, the palms are going to definitely have a very important spot in the landscape. And also just for importance for people. So the palms have played a major role in getting us where we are today. So we get to learn a little bit more or a lot more about them. But nothing says majestic, nothing says greatness and architecture than palm trees. So they're going to be tropical in nature. And luckily for us in Southern California, we are a subtropical climate, especially as we get here into Long Beach area or into the coastal areas. So we are able to grow over 100 species of palms outdoors without any problem. Now, I cannot say the same thing for back east or up north where it's going to get colder, and then the palm trees are going to be limited to some of the ones that are going to be hardy. But for us, over 100 palm trees out there in the landscape, great. So we're looking at Arecaceae after the genus Areca palm. And the old name synonymous for the family is going to be the Palmae. So this is the palm family. Primarily native to the tropics, so throughout the world, tropical countries, you're going to find a lot of different types of palm. And then as you venture up or down, north and south, and it gets colder into the temperate area, then the numbers begin to diminish. We're looking at a monocot, and often palm have been referred to as not real or true trees. They are giant grasses. And you can say something like that, but at the end of the day, they are going to be real trees, or they're going to be arboreal plants that can get quite tall. But if you see here about giant grasses, yeah, you smile and just say, okay. 200 genera, we're not going to look at all of them, only the ones that are going to be much more common and or have some important value for us. And about 3,000 species are the recorded ones. I would like to point out that there are no such thing as poisonous palms. So all of the palms are in a way edible, safe for you to eat, because they did not have a need to develop any toxins. There will be, however, some that can cause you to itch, but that's about it. So there's no such thing as a poisonous or a palm that is going to be harmful, at least not toxic or put you in the hospital. They do like water. And so here is an oasis. This is the natural habitat for the Mexican fan palm. The Mexican fan palm that is throughout the city. Here is a river. It is in the summer, but there's constant amount of water. And so even in the desert, we do have palm trees that will grow as long as they have some kind of connection to water. And some of our California or the northern Mexican palms are going to be found within those oases. So northern Mexico, here is the California native fan palm. This is San Diego County, is Anza Borrego. So it is a desert, but notice it is an oasis. So right in the middle of the canyon, there is enough water that allow this plant to become its own species. And this is the California native fan palm. So when we get closer, you can see the palms, just a couple of them here and there scattered throughout, but most of them are going to be confined to the low areas of the canyon where there's going to be more humidity and more water. And they can survive fire. So the skirt from the leaves will burn, and even the stem can burn a little, but at the end of the day, they have survived many fires or fires for many years, and they're still out there. So this is just about 3 hours from Long Beach, if you ever want to see the native palms. And then in Mexico, it's northern Mexico, we also have the Mexican blue fan palm. So that's not making it into California, but here's the oasis in Matomi Canyon in uh, northern Mexico, but in the mainland side, not in the peninsula side. So I had an opportunity to go there and see it. And even in Africa, you go to Africa and you don't think about palm trees as being iconic of the African savanna, but in fact there's palm trees. You normally think of the baobab, that big tree in the center, but next to that is a native palm to South Africa or the African savanna. So again, they're also iconic. But most of the palms are going to be of a tropical nature in the tropics, and many of them are going to be found as an understory plant. So here's a trail in Brazil, and the canopies above, there is some dapple sunlight that is allowed to filter through the bottom, and that is enough for many of these palms to survive. And so palms for the shade, yes, there's going to be many, many choices. Palms for the sun, yes, there's going to be many, many choices. So there's going to be little palms, medium palms, big palms, depending on where they originate within the canopy or the floor of the forest. And here's when you have them in cultivation. So this is at the Montgomery Arboretum in Florida. Obviously, Florida is a little bit more tropical than us, so they can grow some of the more exotic palms that we might not be able to see around here. And so you have a typical body of a palm. Here at the Montgomery, looking at the house, you have a nice lawn area, and you can see within the distance the iconic stems of some of the palms. So when we're looking at palms, there are going to be two different types. And so this is, I mentioned this to the tree class. These are always going to be my questions. Are we looking at a palm tree that has feather leaf or that has fan leaf? And so on the left, we have a fan palm. So you can see the leaves are going to shape in a fan. They kind of originate in one spot and then the leaflets branch out. Or are they going to be long and narrow, kind of like a feather, as in our Senegal date palm here? Because there are only two types of leaves on palm trees, either feather or fan. So when you divide that, that's already giving you half of the palms. The second question that I always ask, is it a single stem or is it a clumping palm? So once again, on the left, we have a single stem palm, meaning that there's just one trunk coming from the ground. And then at the very top, you're going to have a bunch of leaves. Whereas on the right, with the Senegal date palm, you're going to have palms that are going to be at different ages. So there's going to be an underground stem, and that's going to give rise to stems that will come up, creating a clumping palm. That's going to be good and bad, or it will require different care. But the other thing that I want to caution you is where people may put 2 or 3 or maybe even more baby palms together, creating a clump that in nature is not going to be normally clumping. So is the clumping a nature-based clumping, natural, or is it a man-made clump? So that would be a follow-up question to that answer. So that's it. Palms are going to either be single stem, as in the more iconic ones, or multi-stem or clumping as the ones that will become larger. Here's perfect example. This is, they call it Chrysalidocarpus or Dipsis. Here's a photograph from Martinique. And so you have some of the older stems of the palm. And this is just a clue. Normally when you have a plant that is naturally clumping, you will see stems of different ages. So you have some of the more adult, the taller ones, and then you have a couple that are bigger, and then you have a few that are just going to be sprouting from the base. Whereas when you take several seedlings, clump them together, they're the same age. And so you're going to predominantly have them all the same size. So when you have these differences in the height and the age of the stems, then you know that this is probably a naturally clumping palm. This can grow here in Long Beach, not a problem. Then we have the flower. The flower on palms are going to be very, very tiny. They are then going to have very long clusters, and palms have probably the biggest cluster of flowers in the plant groups. So some of them can reach well below a story of a house. So they're going to be very long, hundreds upon hundreds of tiny flowers that will later become the fruit. And so here we have a feather palm with the flower, but also notice with a single stem palm, there's only going to be one growing shoot, and that is going to be at the tip. Palms would very rarely branch. We have one individual that actually branches naturally, but for the most part, there's just going to be non-branching at all. Here's the leaves that are also going to have two options, whether they're going to be held by the palm, creating a skirt. Here is at Rancho Santa Ana Botanic Garden, a California fan palm with the dead leaves that are still lingering on. Or are they going to be self-cleaning, where the leaves are going to fall off naturally once they have died and the plant has no use for them. So the skirt is a natural component of this palm. Some people like it, some people hate it. It may look dirty. It's up to the individual. But some palms will retain the leaves and create the skirt. Uh, Palms do not have a need for poison or toxins because they have devised a different method, and that is the modification of some of the leaflets. The modification of some of the leaflets that are going to be like spines and thorns and really sharp prickles. So they use weapons to defend themselves from predators, as opposed to toxins or chemicals that are used for the aroid or some of the other plant groups that we'll see later on. And so that is why there is no such thing as a poisonous palm, because the ancestor started to use weapons instead of chemicals, and that's how they all evolved later on. So be aware, many palms can be quite harmful if you are not very careful. So always analyze the palm before you start working with it. But here's just a scenery, Montgomery Botanic Gardens, different palms, different sizes, different ages. And here's the flowers. The flowers are going to normally be produced in a cluster, depending on the species. It may branch or not. And so here is the young flower buds of the coconut palm. And here are some of the fruits for the Quintia or the Hawea palm that we'll see later on. So this is non-branching. And so here's the flowers for the king palm. That is very common out there. So that would be the lower component of this palm. And there's on the left, you have the flowers, and on the right, you already have the fruit for the palm tree. Here's just a close-up of the very, 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 very tiny flowers, and then just the numbers that are going to be produced by each of the palms. And there's another one, the sable or sabal. And that's on my hand, several of the flowers for scale. And so the next question that I always ask is, now that you know that it is a feather or fan, single or multi or clumping, the next question is, what kind of fruit does the plant produce or the palm produce? Is it a coconut fruit, or is it going to be a date? Because those are going to be the only two types of fruits that you're going to find on a palm. And so coconuts are going to have different sizes, different shapes, but they're all going to have some kind of hard shell associated with it that obviously will not be good if you happen to bite. And so here I have the fruit or the coconut for the king palm, the queen palm, and the quintia palm as an example. Or is it going to be a date? A date like the date palm or the Canary Island date palm that will have a very large seed, and there's going to be a husk that in this case is going to be soft and edible, and it's going to have a lot of sugars. So that's it. No more fruits, either a date or a palm. And using all of those characteristics, then that will help you or aid you in determining what type of palm you may be dealing with. And just for comparison, I have the coconut on the left and the date on the right. The date are going to have a furrow or a nice trench in the middle. And the coconuts are normally going to have three eyes. One of them is where the embryo will germinate. And in the case of the queen palm, it kind of looks like a baby seal or a baby otter or some kind of cutesy animal like that if you look at it from different angles. So here's the two fruits or the seeds, the date and the coconut on the left, date on the right. And so here's some native wild palms from Brazil. And if you notice, there is going to be a very large bract on many palms. And in this individual, you have a lot of prickles that are protecting the fruit. So they're going to make sure that no animal can climb and eat the fruit that is not supposed to. But also the leaf. If you look at the leaf, there are very sharp spines. So it's all defense. They don't want anybody to harm the fruit unless it's a rightful animal that will disperse it. And when we look at the stem of the palm, it is going to be different than the other woody plants. So yes, they are kind of like a grass, but a rigid grass that allows them to get big. So when we look at the stem of the palm, on the right side, I have just a general drawing of a regular tree with the wood. On the left, we have a drawing of a palm or a monocot. The first thing that you need to be aware of is that the tip or the apical bud or the growth of the palm is only at the tip. So the tip is the most important part of the palm. If anything happens to that tip, the palm is dead and there's no branching, so it's gone. And that could be many years. So out of the tip, that's where you're gonna get brand new leaves, brand new stems, brand new flowers, brand new everything. So that is the most important part and you need to protect it. The other important thing that makes palms different is that they are gonna have a vascular system that is gonna be scattered throughout the stem. When you compare that to a normal tree, the vascular system is always going to be found behind the bark, which means that if something were to girdle the tree or harm the tree all around the stem, that tree will die. This vascular system allows for thickness or what is known as secondary growth on regular trees, creating an annual ring. And so each year you have a new thickness or a new layer of wood being produced on trees that makes the stem grow. Whereas in palms, you don't have that. You have a system of fibers that are going to act like rebarb that will make the stem rigid and very, very strong. So they have a very strong framework out of fibers that will allow palms to grow very, very tall. Add to that the fact that they're going to be kind of slender, so they will let the wind go by, they will let the rain go by, and so they will work with the environment, not against it or fight against it. So that's going to be the case. And so we have certain palms, such as this, that has had some damage to the stem. Is this detrimental? The answer is no. The palm can live for many years because there is other vascular system that is around the entire stem or throughout the entire stem that is going to continue on feeding the top of the palm. And so you have a couple of other palms like this bottle palm for a common name that seems to have a very slender base. And then as it gets older, you have more of a broader. But I want to point out the lines that you might see on the palm. That is where the leaves were held by the stem. And so you can see as time goes by, you can see how much the palm has grown in 1 year or maybe 2 years by the number of leaves and the leaf scars that are left behind on the stem. And so the stem is so strong that it can even survive hurricanes. So this is from my trip to Cuba. I had to go see what the damage from Katrina, I think that was the hurricane. And so this is the southern island of Cuba. And they have survived hurricanes for many, many, many years. And the ones that do not survive, well, get replaced by the stronger ones that do, that will then have the opportunity to reproduce. And so here are some of the taller palms. The ones that perished, they got cut down. The ones that have survived, a few of them, one that is dead here. And the other ones that are, as long as the tip is unharmed, it can regenerate the palm. And in a few years, it will be able to set seeds and hopefully populate some of the empty areas. So I had to see this because all of these palms, I think a year before this trip, were battered and beaten and got really mangled by a hurricane. And they're still standing, which means that that system of rebar and fiber, and I'm saying rebar for a lack of better description, the fiber that creates a rebar, it's so strong that it's even able to hold on and survive hurricanes. And that's how many of these have evolved. So here's some of the ones that have recovered beautifully. They have also now started to set flowers and fruit. And the casualties, it's going to be normal. That's how they get thinned out. Or a few others from the lower canopy that will have spines throughout the stem. So again, they don't want anything to climb and eat or harm the tip or even the fruit. So until the rightful animal, which is probably be a bird, happens to go by. This one is known as the music tree because as you can see with this person, they take a stick and they move it up and down, creating sound. And I guess in the old days, people used to kind of sing to it and create music. So this is the Brazilian music palm because of that. And there's going to be climbing palms. So if there's a niche, they have to take it. So a few of the climbing palms that will then use some kind of mechanism apparatus to get a hold of other plants and get to the canopy, the top of the canopy. So here I am in Suriname. I'm holding a climbing palm. Notice I have a handkerchief holding the stem because it is very, very spiny. And I have the fruit right here. And so here's the stem, probably where it started. And I had to bring it down to be able to scale for this photograph or have a scale. And so here is the base. It is a clumping. The stems are going to grow very, very long. And you can see the very sharp spines covering the entire stem. And so what then happens is that the leaf is going to be the apparatus that is going to aid the palm in climbing. And so here is the tip of the leaf. Some of the leaflets are shaped like spines and they are facing downward. So almost like hooks. So when the plant is getting higher in the canopy, the leaves are going to stretch. And when they finally expand this hook, they're going to literally hook themselves onto branches. And that's how they're going to hold themselves. And then it's going to grow a little bit higher and then rehook higher up through the leaves. And that's how eventually is going to get to the top of the canopy. So just by using some kind of hooking device, leaves that are modified into a hook that allows them to climb up. And so you have here a pair of those hooks at the end of some of those leaves. And here I'm holding them for scale in my fingers. So that's how they're going to be able to climb. So many, many different types of climbing palms are out there because there was a niche for climbing, as we saw also with some of the aroids before. And here's the fruit for this individual, a coconut that is obviously not very small, so it's not edible or good to eat. And then I'm holding it for scale. And so when we then start looking at the roots are going to be the same girth. So here is a germinating palm, a baby palm, and you have the coconut. And I mentioned one of the holes or one of those eyes will have the living embryo, and that is where the baby palm is going to come out. So you have then the baby palm that will germinate out of this coconut. And then immediately out of the stem, new roots are going to burst out. So it is very common, even from a very young age, for the roots or the permanent roots of the palm to burst right out of the stem. But they're all going to be the same girth, just like the palms that do not get thickness over time. The roots are not going to have thickness either. So they're all going to be the same diameter, and they can grow in length, but they will not have any kind of branching or no girth as well. And so over time, from bursting of more roots from the stem, you will have a broader base that will give the palm a nicer, more stable structure. And so these roots will eventually also anchor themselves to the ground and create a broader base for the stem of the palm. And here's a Canary Island date palm. And you see now the roots are bursting from higher up on the stem. And so this is normal for the palm to have. And this one is by Gelson's, and somehow something has happened to the bottom of the stem, and the roots are appearing about maybe 5, 6, 7 feet above the stem. Again, they should have been below, but for some reason, this one, from possibly some damage, is decided to put them up a little bit higher. And so here is a palm, and you see all the roots that have the same girth as some of the younger ones. So the ones that are in copper color are the ones that are just bursting out of the stem, and those will continue on anchoring the plant. And then there's a palm in South America that is known as the Stilt Palm. And this one is going to break the rules as far as when they say that plants do not move, because this one, over time, it will move. So it gets germinated somewhere where there's going to be some light. And what happens, some of the trees are going to fall and they're going to create openings in the canopy. And so the roots, here's for scale, here's a brand new root. The roots have the ability to detect light. And so when they feel or they sense the light coming from the left side of the palm, they're going to then grow roots in that direction. And so as time goes by, the very first root that came out of the seedling is going to rot and go away. But it's going to be replaced by some of the other roots that will appear later on. And so what happens over time, as the plant keeps sending out more roots in the direction of the light, the plant is able to move several meters over time because new roots will be created, old ones will rot away, and the plant is going to continue following the light wherever that may be. So yes, plants move very slowly. They have longer life than us, but this is the example with the Stilt Palm that has done or is able to do that. And here you can see the old root kind of going away, and some of the younger ones and some of the older ones. So could plants move? Yes, they can walk slowly, but they can. And here's just the base of a coconut palm, just to show you how broad the roots can grow. Here's in Brazil, my very first experience seeing a coconut palm. Sandy area, so it got eroded and the palm is leaning on its sides, but the grass and the sand is being held by the roots of the palm. So you can see the soil plate and how broad can that be. And palms can survive with very little soil. So here are the date palms, and this is how they are sold by the linear feet. And so you can see wrapped in burlap, that is the root ball. So that is the amount of root that was left. So somewhere in a field, there was this palm growing. They literally square the palm, cut off all the roots and leave just a small portion because otherwise it was going to be too heavy. So these are the palms ready to be shipped and ready to be sold. Actually, these are already being delivered. These are the ones that were planted here at the other campus. So here are the Canary Island date palms. And once again, for the amount of palm that you have a very small amount of roots. So these are the ones that were planted here. They were shipped trailer to the campus. And here's the root ball. So that's the amount of root that later gets placed, planted, and eventually new roots will burst out of the palm, and then the plant will eventually have a brand new root system and it's going to allow to grow. So palms have the ability to be transplanted when they're very old, and that is because they can regenerate those roots. The leaves are being tied up because it is protecting that growing tip. So right now, because the root system is not well developed, it probably has no need to grow. So they usually will keep the leaves tied up, and then the sunlight will gradually erode or decay the rope. And by the time the palm is naturally able to rip the rope apart and now expose the leaves to the sunlight, by that time the palm has already been established. It has a brand new root system, and then the palm is well off on its way. So at the other campus, these are the first palms that got planted. And over time, people have found many uses for the leaves. So here's where they have used them traditionally for thatching or for a roof material. If it's in the tropics, it's very hot, so you need good air ventilation if possible. And so material for building screens, material for building roof, they have been used by people for many, 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 many years. And so here's just a few of the palms that have been very important. The date palm, one of the earliest cultivated plants, one of the most important food for people as they came out of Africa and started migrating to the north, eventually going east, and eventually migrating to the Americas. It is known as the tree of life because when people started jumping into the desert, hopefully they'll survive long enough to go find an oasis. They found the oasis, they found water, which is very important, but they also found dates that were very high in sugar, so they can provide them with the food. The dates can then be processed and dried out. That prevents them from molding. They're now very light. They can pack them into small bags, and they can have enough for them to reach the next oasis where they could get water and more dates. And so the date palm became very important to allow the people to escape Africa and colonize the rest of the world. Here they are protecting them. There's also very early records of their people's understanding about pollination because date palms are going to have either pollen bearing or seed bearing, fruit bearing palms. And so the early Egyptians knew that they need to have a pollen bearing individual in close proximity. And here they are protected. Hand pollination was done very early to encourage yields or high yields. So here's the dates on a very young one, high in sugar. Here, this is in California. And here's some of the other the dates. So a good palm can produce a lot of dates, and those are not going to be spoiling because they are very high in sugar. As long as you don't get them wet and moldy, they're going to be fine, and they're very good. And just some of the varieties that you may find here. When they are fresh, they are crunchy, they are crispy, they are a little bit astringent, but if you never had fresh dates, I would highly recommend that you try them. The Rio date palm is naturally a clumping individual. So I have here a photograph of a young palm, and at the base, bursting out of the stem, you have shoots, lateral shoots. So this gave the ability for mass production. So if this happens to be a very good palm fruit, very good date, then every single baby plant will give me exactly the same fruit. So I can just separate the baby plants, put them to the side, and now I have increased my yields by 2, and then by multiplying by the number of babies, I can then come up with a big field of the module or some of the better quality dates that are out there. So in nature, it's clumping, but in the landscape, it's used as a single stem because they take away the babies and use them for other means. And here's a photograph in Long Beach that somehow this date palm is still branching at the very top. So you have very old babies that were cut off, and there's a bunch of other babies coming everywhere. And this is probably not normal. I think this is one of those weird individuals that I just maybe decided to branch everywhere. But it's here in Long Beach, and I forget where. But look around because this is not uncommon to see because the nature of this palm is to be clumping, not single stem. But most often in the landscape, this is what you're going to find. Just a very nice upright palm. And this is by Cal State or Long Beach State, where you have a very old individual. And then you have the more majestic plant palm, which is going to be the coconut palm. So for the landscape, everybody strives to have a coconut palm. However, coconut palms are very, very tropical, too tropical for us. So even our cold Long Beach temperatures are very cold for coconut palms. That is why you don't see them out there. But it's very majestic. It's very beautiful. Everybody wants to have a coconut palm in their house or in the yard. Here is in Florida, obviously tropical. You can get away with having some of them out there. Here's in my very first trip to Brazil. I had to have a photograph of me drinking a coconut, eating a coconut underneath a coconut palm. Obviously, everybody wants that the first time they see it. Here's the flowers. And then here's the fruit themselves. The coconut is also known as the tree of life to the Polynesians and or the Pacific Islanders, because as the Pacific Islanders started hopping on boats and started exploring the Polynesian islands and all those islands in those that part of the world, they had to survive long enough to find an island. By that time, all of the islands had coconut palms growing everywhere. So within the coconut, they were able to find fresh water to drink and also a lot of meat that was high in calories that then can survive. Given that they can also survive for very long, they will stock their boats with brand new coconuts and carry the water in a nice, natural, nature-made container with food. And so to the explorers of the islands, the coconut palm became the tree of life because they were able to survive by eating it and finding those islands, eventually leading all the way to Hawaii, and now there's evidence, maybe evidence that they have even made it to the Americas by then. So here's the coconuts with the husk. So you take away the husk and then you have the seed inside. Once again, the coconuts have 3 eyes. So here are the ones for the coconut. One of them will have the embryo, and that will be this one. So this is the embryo of the palm. And if given the opportunity, that will germinate as you can start seeing here. So when the embryo is beginning to germinate, it's going to start consuming the coconut water as well as the white portion of the coconut. And then what happens is going to kind of become a foam-like material, and it's going to be known as coconut apple. It's edible, it tastes horrible, just like a horrible aftertaste. I've had it, like you, never again. But some people eat it, it is sold. So when there happens to be a coconut that is already starting to germinate, you will find this coconut apple. By this time, the meat is no longer good, and then you let the coconut germinate. However, if it manages to survive, then you have the coconut palm that the embryo has germinated, and here you have the baby palms coming out of the coconut. So then they'll grow, and eventually they'll become a brand new palm, and then they'll have more fruit that will continue on feeding the world. Here is probably my favorite area, and this is Cuba. I say I want to move here. Abandoned by rivers, not abandoned, but nobody was there. With coconuts everywhere next to the river. It's like, yep, I want to retire and move there. So coconut palms everywhere with rivers, water, perfect. Here's some fancy way of using the coconuts. So some of the dry coconuts that were never eaten, they get disguised as fish or other sea animals. As I came across some of this, somebody who had like, I want one of those, kind of cutesy, but hey, you gotta do whatever you can. Or the coconut pie. The Filipino buko or coconut pie is the best thing in the world. If you've never had it, you have no idea what heaven is, because this is a very good pie. Not like the coconut cream or coconut custard that the Americans eat. The Filipino buko, which means young coconut or coconut pie, is the best if you ever get a chance to try it. Or there's going to be several other palms that have important value. So here's the Coil Palm. This is native to Mexico, tropical Mexico, Nayarit, in some of those areas. And it is very common for people to take away the skin, and the husk is going to be kind of slimy and kind of tasty. And so people will kind of roll it around their mouth, extracting whatever they can out of the husk. Eventually, people started making them into candy. So here is the husk. They took away the skin, and they now the husk. That is the edible component with sugar and cinnamon. Here is a different palm. So whenever I go in my trips, if there's anything that I can eat and try new, that's great. Here's in Suriname. This is a Suriname native palm that I came across. Here the husk is kind of fleshy and juicy. It had a good flavor, but I get something new, so I got a chance to try. Or Bactris, this is Pejibaye. So this is a palm that is normally eaten in Central and South America. So I know in my first experience with it was in Costa Rica. And this is now from Trinidad and Tobago. This is the island. So I went to the market and I saw it. So here's for sale. It's just a ripened palm. So I had to take a photograph. And so the process here is that you would cook the palm. So you would either steam it or boil it. And it is the husk that you see here, not the coconut or the hard portion. It is this husk that will then cook, and then you can eat it. It tastes very similar to pumpkin. And I'm gonna say maybe as good as pumpkin would be the rightful term. And so here is a plant, a palm that is eaten kind of like a vegetable, a cooked vegetable that is important for people in some of the tropical countries. So Pejibaye is a name that I know. And so that's the one. Or again, 101 other uses for coconut, like vinegar, or there is the coconut heart. So this is a South American palm that is commonly cultivated, and the heart, the stem is eaten when it's soft and sauté as a vegetable. Or the teddy palm, which is a fruit that you normally add it to some kind of drinks, also with your boba tea and all of those things. Or the seeds that are used for extracting oil. So this is one that is sold. You can eat it, it's kind of dry, but they are high in oil content. And or coconut wine right here. Or the acai berry, that is a super antioxidant, one of those things that is, you go to any of those fufu drink place and they sell acai fruit or acai with the granola. The acai is the fruit of a coconut or a palm from South America. Now, I have never seen it in person. I have also yet to see the fruit, because once it's ripened, it is very difficult to transport. So that is why in most cases, the fruit is harvested, it gets kind of milled or ground up and made into kind of a flour that is then mixed with a few other things. And that's how they would generate the acai slush that is then added. They add some of the fruit, and they add some of the granola, and then you have your acai bowl that you see right here with banana, strawberries, and blueberries and granola. So that is the fruit of a palm. So the outside husk, that is in this case, is made into something that we eat. Or the African oil palm. And this, if you wanna talk about environmental damage, this is gonna be one of the worst palms for environmental purposes. It's economic value. So because people use oil palm for everything. So next time start reading the labels of everything. If it says oil palm or palm oil, sorry, it's the African oil palm. because it gets added to makeup, it gets added to food, it gets added to everything. There's a big market, and so the areas decided to mass plant them, and so every year they clear acres upon acres of new forest because people need the income, and they will plant the oil palm. So here I was very happy when I came across it in Chiapas, Mexico. I know I say very happy, even though I wasn't, but I was very happy to finally see the African oil palm. Here's a brand new plantation in a very young age. It already begins to bear the fruit. And so here is where they harvested the seed, and they were being put in onto a lorry, and they were going to be sent out to the distillery where they would crush the seed and extract the oil. So there's the flower cluster or the fruit clusters. And so I was able to take a couple of those seeds for scale, and I was able to cut them. And so they take the oils from the husk as well as from the white components inside the shell. So again, palm oil, it's in everything. And there's a lorry that is full. And in Chiapas, Mexico, I would see lorry upon lorry, just palm oil being taken out and taken to the distillery. So again, important, you have to look at the individuals that live in the area. They have a need for income. And so if there's income in a palm, they're not going to value their native forest because it's just wild and there's nothing for them to grow there. So again, it's good and bad. Good for the people, bad for the environment. And then we have Sa palmetto or sabal, native to Florida. And here is probably the only baby palm that I've seen in Long Beach. I think this is on Daisy and PCH. It hasn't grown much. Here's with flowers, but that's where they extract the palmetto pills that are supposed to be good for men for prostate cancer or to prevent prostate cancer. But later on in Huntington Park or HP, I came across a mature individual. So here's probably planted in the 40s, maybe even earlier. So I was very happy there. I am hugging the palm because this has been the biggest one that I've seen. It was loaded with fruit, and I was able to pick a few, and I can go back and pick some more fruits later on. But that has been the biggest sabal or sa palmetto that I've seen. And then there's a palm known as Celaca, very spiny. Here I was able to see it for the first time. I think this is Fairchild Botanic Garden in Miami, Florida. And Celaca is known for having fruits that kind of have scales like snake. And so they are known as snake palm or snake fruit. And so they're edible. I've never had the opportunity to try them. I was able to see the fruit in Ecuador, and I was able to see the palm in Miami, Florida. But here I'm holding them for scale, how they look. And there's a few others of those. So Celaca, snake palm, as they are commonly referred to. And then there's going to be a very important palm that is going to be known as palm ivory. And it is important because the fruit is going to become very hard, and you can mold it and do shapes just like real ivory. So now ideally there is no need to kill the elephants and the rhinos and or some of the porpoises for taking their ivory tusks. And so here is just examples of some of those ivories. Again, I have never seen this in person. I don't think I've ever seen it in person. But many palms do have the possibility of having this replacement for the real ivory. Now, this is what I got from a couple of the artist vendors that are brought over. So these are palm seeds made into a dolphin and a turtle. And then there's another one, very important, that is known as rattan. So the real rattan for furniture that is very, very expensive. is a climbing palm. Native to Borneo, I think, or tropical Asia. Here is Trinidad and Tobago Botanic Garden, where I was able to finally see it in person. So I got the name tag here. I put it just so that you can see the name, the Polytodi name. So this is rattan for the furniture. So it is a climbing palm, and that's why the stems are very slender and usually very spiny. And yes, there's going to be a lot of spines and prickles to them. Obviously, those are removed once they are processed and made into the furniture and all of that. So there's rattan palm or rattan wood. And there's a different view with just people walking around for scale. And then Hypnea, which is the only truly branching palm. So this is in Fairchild, so it is tropical. I also saw it in Montgomery. So here's the palm, and they decided to branch at some point, giving two stems, and it's doing the same thing, and it will continue to branch more and more and more. So, but other than this, and maybe one or two more that I have never seen, this is the only truly branching palm that is out there in nature. And then here's from Fairchild. I think the first one is Montgomery. This is Fairchild. You can see uh, that's a different one. And then there's the lipstick palm. And everybody who goes into the tropical areas, they want it. Obviously, that cannot grow here. It's too tropical. But it is the base of the leaf that is going to have this very, very bright scarlet color that is held by the palm. And so here's Suriname, this is the airport, or maybe Suriname or Aruba, one of those. I think it's Suriname. So there's using the landscape, uh, really nice, really architectural, and add the red color to it. You can see why people want it, but don't get your hopes up. Unless global warming really heats up things, we don't cannot grow this one around here. And then the biggest fruit or seed in the world is a coconut. And I think one year I answered that to the Starbucks, local Starbucks that had that question. Like, yeah, Coco's a mare, no problem. I know the answer. So Coco de Mer is a palm that is found only in the Seychelles Islands. And it is a palm that wants to stay. So it is the biggest coconut in the world, and it is the biggest seed. It is often known as the double coconut. And so before they even knew where they were coming, some of these fruits were found by travelers. And so this is where the tales or the stories about mermaids came from, because they would see something that looks like a rump that was kind of going into the water. And even before when they would wash onto Europe, they would wonder what this was. So it was later on when they explored the Seychelles Islands that they found it. It is a very, very large palm. And then it cleared the misconception. But obviously, once you start to see the fruit, then there's always going to be the jokes. So there's for scale and more jokes about this double coconut palm. And again, mermaids floating on the water. That's where they came from, or the stories from the sailors. So if anybody asks, what is the biggest seed in the world? The double coconut from the Seychelles Islands.